So on the count of three, I want everyone to give a Yahoo, okay? 1, 2, 3, Yahoo! Hey, that was really good. Why did you do that? Well, here's what we have to say Yahoo about. Do you realize that today, December the 23rd, is 6 seconds longer than just 2 days ago? We have 6 more seconds of daylight than we did. What are you gonna? Yeah. So 1, 2, 3. Yahoo! It's getting. The darkness is shrinking, and the light is growing. So what are you gonna do with your 6 seconds of daylight? You can figure that out. You can figure that out later. But we have another reason to sort of shout Yahoo, and that's all wrapped up in Mary's song that the Scouts read when they did the Advent wreath, and they read Mary's song, and that's recorded in Luke 1. So, I mean, if you have a Bible, you might want to look at that as we sort of dissect this a little bit. So, Mary, the angel, we know the story, the angel came to Mary and told her she was going to have God's child, right? And then she goes to visit her cousin Elizabeth, who's also with child, John the Baptist. And Elizabeth calls her very blessed. And then Mary, just like a good musical, breaks out into song. We have Mary's song. And I don't know if it happened that way, but think about this. Mary spent 3 months with Elizabeth, and she probably just had time to just think how amazing it is that she was carrying the baby Jesus. And she probably at some point wrote that down into a poem, and she ended up giving it to Luke, probably, and Luke included it here. Now there's 2 parts to Mary's song, to her poem. The first part about it is how blessed she is. And that's verses 46 and goes down typically considered through verse 50. And then verse 51 to 55, it talks about how blessed the world is because of the baby Jesus. I've always got the first part. Yeah, I get that. Mary's blessed. Any mother would be that way. But for some reason, I always struggle with the second part. In other words, why would this young girl, Mary, talk about kingdoms being destroyed and all that kind of thing? The proud and the arrogant being scattered, and the powerful drugged down, and the rich, everything taken away, and just sort of seemed a little unseemly to me, perhaps. But of course, her child's no ordinary child. Her child's the Savior of the world. Her child is the one who, to those who hope, gives mercy. The low will be lifted up, and those who are hungry will be filled. So maybe it's very appropriate she writes her song like she does, with these 2 parts, and perhaps by the Holy Spirit's inspiration, she said what just needed to be said. But here's my problem with Mary's song, other than what I just said. Here's my problem with Mary's song. I know a lot of people who don't seem to have a lot of mercy. I know the proud and arrogant and the rich and the powerful who are still in the same powers and position they were in before. Nothing's changed. And I know there are hungry who are still hungry. So, I thought Jesus was going to change all this. And yes, and he started. He started with Mary by choosing a young girl, Mary. So this brings us back to the first part of the hymn where Mary is talking about how blessed she is. And she says, for God has looked with favor on the lowliness of his servant. She understands how blessed she is. Surely from now on, all generations will call me blessed. I don't think that's a statement of pride. I think she's amazed. She's amazed that 2,000 years ago, 2,000 years from then, people on the other side of the world will know her name. That'd be amazing. She's amazed because God has chosen her. Don't miss that. God chose her. You know, I read nowhere in the Bible. Mary, I'm sure Mary was a good person, a good girl. I'm sure. But nowhere do I read in the Bible that she was perfect. Nowhere do I read in the Bible that she was without sin. She didn't earn the right to be the mother. God chose her. I think that's important because in the same way, God chooses us. God chooses us, her son, to grow up, and one of the things that he would say to his own disciples was this in John 15:16. And I think by extension he says it to us, not just his disciples. You did not choose me, but Jesus says, I chose you. I chose you, and I appointed you to go and bear fruit that will last, so that the Father will give you whatever you ask him in my name. I'm giving you these commands so that you may love one another. How is God going to fulfill Mary's song? He's going to fulfill it because he chose you, and he chose me. That's how he's going to fulfill it. We're the ones, you and me, who are going to change the world. In fact, what we're going to see today is we can change the world in 3 simple steps. Are you ready to change the world in 3 simple steps? I said simple, not easy. But they are simple steps. Okay, here's the first step. Before you can change the world, you need to change yourself. First, we need to change ourselves. Because let's face it, sometimes we're the problem in the world. Sometimes our own pride and arrogance gets in the way, and we're the problem. If we're the problem, we can't change the world. We have to get rid of that. We have to change. But we can't change ourselves. This is no self-help program. We need help in changing. We need God's help in changing. And here's how we're going to do it. We're going to follow God's great commandment. We know his great commandment. It has 2 parts, and the first part says this: love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And Jesus said this about love and God. Jesus said, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. You will obey me. So here's the thing. We change ourselves through obedience. It's pretty simple. It's through obedience. So we obey God by reading his word. We obey God by praying. And we obey God that when he says to do something, we go and we do it. And when we're obedient like that, we change. We don't have to make it happen. God does it. You see, that's what Mary did. Mary was not perfect, but you know what she was? Obedient. She obeyed. What did she say? The angel came and said, you know, this is what's going to happen, Mary. She could have had many reactions, but her reaction was, may it be to me as you have said. That's all she had, was obedience. And when we're obedient, first we will change. So first step, changing the world, change ourselves. Second step to changing the world is this. Change another. Change another by love. By love. John 15:17 says, Jesus says, I'm giving you these commands so that you may love one another. Change another. You know, very few of us will have the opportunity to stand before like a stadium full of people, you know, thousands of people, and preach the gospel to them and have thousands come forward, you know, like a Billy Graham. We won't have that opportunity, but that's okay. We can change a person, or we can help change a person. God changes the person. We can help change a person by love. The second part of the Great Commandment, the first part, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. The second part is what? Love your neighbor. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love your neighbor. That's what we're talking about. Do kind acts to your neighbor. I mean, because we all have people, we all have family members and neighbors and coworkers that we can reach out to. And perhaps the greatest kindness of all is when we tell them about Jesus, right? And nobody should put down the fact that they're not doing enough. I mean, somebody might say, you know, I'm talking to a coworker, and I don't know how it's going. Don't put that down. You don't have to reach a whole bunch of people. Maybe you're not called to, but just the person who's there. You know, I don't know if you're familiar with the ministry of Albert McMacken. I doubt it. I doubt you've ever heard of Albert McMacken. He wasn't a preacher. He wasn't a pastor. He worked on a farm, okay, in North Carolina during the Depression. But you know, one thing he did, he told the farmer's son that there was this revival going on. There was an evangelist by the name of Mordecai Ham. He was a pretty famous evangelist back then. And he said, why don't you go to that? And they went to the revival, and the farmer's son gave his heart to Jesus Christ. And his farmer's son became a pastor. All because of Albert McMacken. You know. Oh, by the way, the farmer's son, his name was William Franklin Graham Jr., but they call him Billy Graham. What would have happened if Albert McMacken had not invited Billy Graham to that revival? Who knows what would have happened? Who knows what difference it makes when we touch one life? When we touch one life. So we change ourselves. Second step, we change another. And the third, by love. And the third step is, then we change the world. We know we're commanded to change the world. The Great Commission, Matthew 28 says, Jesus says right before he goes back to the Father, go and make disciples of all nations. Of all nations. But we change the world one life at a time. It's not easy, but we change the world one life at a time. And I'm convinced that the church won't change the world until the church gets serious about Christmas. I mean, Christmas is Emmanuel. God is with us. And until the church gets serious about having God with them in their own lives, individually, and as the church gets serious about having Emmanuel, God with us, and sharing that with others, we won't change the world. Because we're not serious. So many in our churches, I see it over and over again, and I've been guilty as well, haven't taken Emmanuel serious enough, haven't taken Christmas serious enough. Most of the people in our churches, Christmas is still more about presents and parties and all that kind of stuff than it is about Jesus. Oh yeah, well, we'll go to Christmas Eve service, don't get me wrong, but what's really most important? What's most important? So here's what I want to say to sort of wrap this up. If you want to be more serious about your faith, if you want to be so serious and you want to be obedient to God so that you change yourself because that's the first step, then I would like you to talk to me about that. Talk to me about that. If you're not serious right now, if you're happy where you are, that's fine. I'm not putting anybody down, don't get me wrong. But if you're happy where you are, don't talk to me. Or, I mean, you can come and say hi. I mean, we can talk about football or something. I'm not saying never talk to me. That's not, but I'd like to talk to those who are especially serious, who really want to grow in their faith. Because we go through seasons of life, and sometimes we're there. Because when we get a few people, if we can get a group of people, even a small group, who are so serious and willing to change themselves, and who are ready to change another, and that group of people will start to change the world. In Mary's song that she saw will come true as we change the world. You see, we have hope that all this is possible. For one reason, we have hope because, today we have 6 more seconds of daylight. There's hope, there's more light. But especially there's hope because the light has come into the world. And we're going to sing this closing hymn, which will remind us once again, the reason for our hope is that love came down at Christmas. Let us stand as we sing. Let us take a hand as we have our closing prayer. Indeed, love came down that first Christmas and now lives in us. Father God, I think you're telling me to ask the question, what are we going to do about it? You live in us. What are we going to do about it? For too long, too many of us have just gone on our way, lived our lives, but maybe it's time to change. Change ourselves so we can change another and change the world. Father God, open us up to the power of your Spirit that we may indeed be able to change. And that we may indeed be able to change this world. Praise be to God. And all God's children said, Amen.